Last week, I was searching around the internet looking for a Star Wars topic for our main show, the one that comes out on Tuesdays, when I came across an article about a musical reopening in New York City this month called A Musical About Star Wars. I found the cast recording on Spotify and listened to it, and I immediately fell in love with this show. I am so excited to be joined today by the show's composer and fellow superfan of The Last Jedi, Billy Recce. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to it.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. And if you're not 100% filled in on what that story is, it actually comes up in my interview here. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story. It is written on our souls and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why I'm honored to be joined this week by Billy Recce. Billy Recce is a Billboard Charting, two-time MAC Award and Neo Award winning composer, lyricist, singer-songwriter, and playwright based in New York City. In addition to the long-running hit, A Musical About Star Wars, which we're talking about today, his works include Balloon Boy, Rachel Unraveled, and his sold-out Snowflake Songbook series. His debut album, The Perks of Being a Snowflake, is on iTunes and Spotify. But the show we're talking about today, A Musical About Star Wars, is a crazy, out-of-this-galaxy idea that works surprisingly well. And I asked Billy how in the galaxy this musical came about.
It's a great question. So I actually was not the one who came up with it. I was hired to come onto the show. Tom Dangora, who is the producer of the show and one of the directors of the show, we met at a conference called Stage the Change on Long Island, sort of this conference about teaching young kids how to do theater with a social voice edge. And we got to talking, and he was like, I'm about to write this Star Wars musical, and we're looking for a composer. Do you like Star Wars? And I was like, you literally came to the right person. I wrote my Common App essay for college about Star Wars, about episode 3. So I wrote a couple songs on spec, which means I sort of auditioned to get this show. And, what I love about it is that it wasn't just like, we're going to do a Star Wars musical. It's a really cool concept at its heart. It's about these two Star Wars super fans who put on this musical literally about Star Wars. So in doing this, we're able to sort of not just like talk about our favorite parts of Star Wars, but really celebrate the fandom and what it means to be a fan of Star Wars and be a part of this community of people who love it,
Well, it's awesome. It's absolutely hilarious. I've listened to it on Spotify a couple of times. I had my son in the car with me, one of them. He's 16, and he does the podcast with us. So we were laughing. The Hamilton Anakin one
great. Yeah.
was phenomenal. One thing is really clear about this. You really love Star Wars. You mentioned that as well. There are lots of little jokes in there. You can tell you're really passionate about Star Wars. And really, when you're listening to it, Star Wars fans are sort of getting a double-edged sword. They're getting stuff that they can absolutely find hilarious, and then kind of it hurts a little bit because that's who we are as fans.
Right.
What do you love so much about Star Wars?
Oh, God. Well, I grew up in a real Star Wars household. My dad was really into Star Wars, most fathers of that generation, were. And he sort of imparted it to us, as we were growing up. We were growing up with the prequels, me and my brother. And like what I mentioned before, how I wrote my Common App essay, to get into college, about episode 3, my parents like pulled me out of school to go see the premiere of that movie, and
right.
So it's this kind of thing where like, it was really important to us in our household, for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know if I can tell you why I like it so much as like, it's always been there for us, and it's been, a community, going to see episode 3 in theaters was the first time that I felt really like a part of a community, So yeah, I mean, I just love sort of the culture around it. I love having this sort of shared experience with people. I love being able to argue with people about it, about The Last Jedi, which I love, which I think it's the best one since The Empire Strikes Back. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
We love Laura Dern in a musical about Star Wars. We have a whole big sight gag with Laura Dern that I won't spoil. You have to come see it. But if you're a Laura Dern fan, this is the show for you. But yeah, I really do think it is about having this sense of a shared identity with people and this, shared love that you can collectively experience together.
So you grew up in the prequel era and, you talk about Revenge of the Sith, and yet in this musical, you are comfortable enough to poke fun at the prequels and the sequels. And you mentioned The Last Jedi as well. Mm-hmm. What is it about this, why do you feel so comfortable poking fun at this, and what makes that such a fun part of this musical?
Well, because that's what the community is, right? That's what the joy of it is, and where the energy of it is these arguments. Our 2 leads in the show, Scott and Taylor, who play themselves, who also co-wrote the book, the libretto of the show. We call them lovingly a millennial Falcon and a Gen X winger, and Taylor's character grew up on the prequels and loves the prequels, and Scott's character, who is a little bit older and grew up on the original, hates the prequels, right? So that is sort of this contentious part of their relationship that sort of, moves the plot forward and leads us into the Hamilton song and whatnot. And again, that is just sort of where the joy of this community lies, we just did the show in Lincoln, Nebraska, randomly at the Lead Center for a 3,000 seat audience. We went to bring it out, which is crazy because it's about an 160 seat theater when we do it in New York. So it's crazy to be in New York, to be in Lincoln, and to like truly sell out the space. And just to hear the roar of not even so much like laughter, but like recognition of these moments and these beats and these arguments that every Star Wars fan has had at that sort of massive level, was magical. And it sort of just reminded us that like, oh my God, this really is something that like every Star Wars fan has had this exact argument,
Yeah. So, there's nothing sacred in this musical. I mean, the expanded universe is poked fun at, the sequels and that kind of thing. Let's dive into your Star Wars fandom for just a couple of minutes. So what is, you mentioned you love The Last Jedi and you put it on par with The Empire Strikes Back. So let's talk Last Jedi, because in this household, The Last Jedi is at the same level.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
It is. In fact, if you look behind me, and this is terrible audio for the podcast, but who cares? Everybody already knows this story. Those 3 comic books on the wall actually have the main Porg from the Millennium Falcon that my youngest son, he was 12 at the time, asked Rian Johnson what the name of that Porg was, and Ryan let him name it. And so they put it in the comic book. It's up there. So this is how much we love The Last Jedi.
Wait, how did that happen?
Well, again, everybody listening to the show already knows the story, so I'll try to keep it real brief, and then I'll send you the video of it a little bit. We were living in LA, or outside of LA at the time, and our podcast was brand new, like 2 months old. It was terrible. We'd never done anything like podcasting before. I mean, imagine having a 16-year-old kid that's in that really awkward stage where he's got the braces and he's like the ultimate Star Wars teenage nerd, and the 12-year-old introvert whose only line in almost every episode of the podcast to that point was interesting. He would just say interesting over and over again. He's scared to death. We're sitting there. We had about 100 listeners that that really embraced the show, and Collider website, along with IMAX headquarters, sponsored a showing of The Last Jedi with Rian Johnson in January of 2018. So a couple months after the movie came out. At about halfway through this Q&A with Rian Johnson, I look over at Nathan, my youngest, and he's like crying. And I'm like, this great dad moment, right? I can come in here and I can encourage him, find out what's going on. I'm like, dude, what are you crying about? This is ridiculous. Don't you ever do this, suck it up, that kind of stuff, right? I'm like, what are you crying about? And he's like, I want to ask Ryan a question. I'm like, well, you got one of two choices here. You can ask him a question or you can stop crying. But that's the other thing. So at the end of the thing, he raises his hand and Ryan points right at him and asks, what's the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon? And my kid just comes up with this name, Turbis. And I'm looking over at him like, what in the world is Turbis? And I find out later that it's our dog's name with the syllables switched. Our dog's name is Buster, which is classic Star Wars, right? The Tuckerization of the Star Wars name, right?
Right, right.
It's like George Lucas came up with it himself. So anyway, he points at my son, Ryan does, and he says, that's a great Star Wars name. And he's like, that porg's name is now Turbis. And so we meet with him afterwards, and 2 years later, they put him in the comic book, and it's a lot of fun with it. So,
that's so cool.
It is cool. You should write a song about the story of the Ballad to Turbis. No, anyway.
That's the next musical. We're working on it.
There we go. You can tell the story. So what is it about The Last Jedi? Because it is such a controversial film in fandom. Why do you love The Last Jedi?
Well, I think it's because it sort of took everything we knew, what we thought we knew about the Star Wars universe, and turned it on its head, and sort of forced us to, I think, collectively reckon with, honestly, the stakes of this universe, right? And that people get hurt and that terrible things happen, and that also there can be terrible people, the heroes that we grew up with, sometimes can be not great people. And I think it's just so deeply mature. And I just really appreciate the balls it took to do that, and to sort of create something that like Rian Johnson probably knew would anger some fans. But it comes from a place of love and sort of telling us to like, hey, grow up, like these are real people. Let's treat them as real characters who are dealing with terrible things happening to them. And then of course too, I mean, just like, I love like the Laura Dern suicide is incredible. I don't mind the Mary Poppins, Leia thing. And I really like Rose too. I just think it's a really cool collection of characters with a lot of really cool set pieces. The casino scene, whatever, I could do without it. But for the most part, I just, I was so taken aback by it. And, with Disney in a good way, and with Disney taking over Star Wars and sort of, doing this new movie thing, new TV show every year, whatever it is, they have the opportunity to really play with the form and play with how stories are told in this universe, Solo was not great, but it was this sort of like, campier Western style thing. And I think, in telling more stories, we have the ability to play with form, right? I want to see what a noir movie looks like in the Star Wars universe. I want to see what a musical looks like in the Star Wars universe, and I would like to be the person to write it, but if it's not me, I still want to see it, that's the thing, and I think that's what The Mandalorian does so well too, right? Is that it plays with the form of how these stories are told. So yeah.
It's funny you talk about Rian Johnson and his love for Star Wars. I have a friend of mine that describes it this way, and I think it's actually spot on. He says that J.J. Abrams is a fan of Star Wars movies, and Rian Johnson is a fan of Star Wars. Absolutely. And there's a different approach towards both of their film sets of films with that. That's really cool. So if you could change one thing about The Last Jedi, what would you change about that film?
Oh, gosh. Interesting. I would have given poor Admiral Akbar a better send-off.
Okay.
That's what I would give, I don't know. I mean, I watched it again for the first time in a while, a couple months ago, and I truly was just like, every time I watch it, I'm continually taken aback by just the fact that people did not like this movie. Like, it is just like, the cinematography is gorgeous, the score is, I think, the best of the new scores. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're truly, again, the casino scene, again, like I said, I'm like, but again, there's always one like awful set piece in every Star Wars movie, even the originals.
Which is what makes it Star Wars, right?
Right, exactly.
For it to be a real Star Wars movie.
Exactly. Yeah. What about you? What is your...
my one thing I would change about The Last Jedi?
Yeah.
I think that the way Luke handled the lightsaber in that opening sequence.
Sure.
I understand exactly the motivation and what's going on with that. It makes perfect sense to me, but I think it took a lot of fans out of the movie prematurely. I think that if he would have treated the lightsaber the same way he does at the end of Return of the Jedi, when he decides he's not going to strike down Vader, if he just casts it to the side and it mirrors that moment, then it's like, I don't want this anymore. I'm rejecting this item here versus throwing it flippantly over his shoulder. I think that made such a huge, it pulled so many people out of the story that they missed the rest of the movie as a result of it. So
interesting. But yeah, but I get what you're saying though. But I also do get why it did that, right? I mean, it's this character arc that he is given. You know, he learns to respect the lightsaber, right? You know, and not just sort of throw it over his shoulder, but sort of recognize the impact that it has had on his life, you know, as though he is like, 30 years sober or something, right? And somebody handed him a glass of beer. Of course, his first instinct, would be to knock it out of their hands. Exactly. Yeah. But I hear that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So if you set The Last Jedi aside, what's your favorite of all the rest of the Star Wars movies?
Probably Empire Strikes Back, I would say.
Why is that?
Again, that's, the one that we probably watched in the household the most growing up. And we love Lando in our household. I don't know, that it feels just the most Star Wars to me. I think that the storytelling is super tight for Empire Strikes Back. I think it has the best set pieces. It has the best fight scenes, and the best reveals. So yeah.
Billy's point about The Last Jedi is really important to understand. Rian Johnson told a story that presented our characters as real people, not perfect heroes without weakness and failure. Poe Dameron truly is the arrogant, overconfident, insubordinate pilot who leads his team into a mission that succeeds on paper, but at a cost too great. Finn isn't the First Order defector that helped bring down Starkiller Base in The Force Awakens. Instead, he's a coward running from a war he never wanted to be a part of. And of course, Luke Skywalker has lost the bravado he had when he took on the remnants of the Empire as he came to take away Grogu in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. He's broken. He's failed. He's lost his connection to the Force, and he's turned his back on the New Republic. But those weaknesses and those failures are what make the movie's resolution so powerful. Poe becomes the leader he needs to be. Finn finds the courage to sacrifice everything if he needs to. And Luke Skywalker comes out of exile to face down the entire First Order with a laser sword. And that's why it's such a beautiful story. My interview with Billy would continue in just a moment, but I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Cufflinks.com. Billy will almost certainly be dressed to his absolute best when a musical about Star Wars reopens in New York City on December 17th. And Billy should definitely head on over to Cufflinks.com to get some amazing Star Wars accessories for the sharp-dressed fan. If you're not familiar with Cufflinks.com, all you need to know is that they have over 3,000 items, including cufflinks, ties, tie bars, and socks from all of the fandoms that you love. Star Wars, which is much better than Star Trek. Much. Listen to the soundtrack to know what I'm talking about there. Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, and more. We love Cufflinks.com because they're family owned. They're run by a couple of brothers who geek out about Star Wars as much as we do. So if you want to help out this show and you want to look great doing it, head on over to Cufflinks.com. Take a look at everything it has to offer and get your Christmas list together. Be sure to tell your family to use Tatooine 15 at the checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. I think Billy should check out the Join the Resistance cufflinks. I think they'd be perfect for him. Well, as we continue my interview with Billy, I ask him what his earliest Star Wars memory is. It's probably not what you'd expect. Here's his answer.
We used to go to Disney a lot growing up, and we would always make sure to go to the Star Tours ride. So I would say there's this picture of me when I was probably about 6, going the first time outside at Star Tours in Disney. They used to have what are they called now? The little walkers that you could go and pose on. Yes, excuse me. Yes. But yeah, so there's a photo of me from that time. We went, I would say quite honestly is writing that, would be the earliest experience and sort of our collective love for that ride. But again, like truly this like sense of community. And because I was in 3rd grade when episode 3 came out, and I don't think I saw episode 1 or 2 in theaters. I don't have a memory of it. So truly, like, that was the first time I saw a Star Wars movie in theaters, that left an impact, and like being in this like completely packed space with 200 fans, seeing this movie for the first time and seeing a not bad Star Wars movie after being disappointed by the 2 before it, I think was a looking back, at least I understand that. And that was just a really special, impactful moment for me, because I hadn't even seen like a lot of theater at that point. So I didn't really have this experience of being in a packed theater with people who were happy to be there and experiencing something in real time.
That's awesome. So you grew up with the prequels. It's 20 years later now. You mentioned like Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones were not great Star Wars movies, when you're watching them originally. Has your perspective on the prequels changed in 20 years?
No, not at all. No, I can't say it has. Those are the ones that I find myself revisiting the least. I think for good reason. And, I had to revisit them when we were writing the show, and I just honestly found them a real chore to sit through. Again, episode 3 is good. I genuinely think like that one is the one that has probably aged the best. I think it's just this like they build the universe in an interesting way, I suppose, but George Lucas's obsession with the politics of that universe is just told it's not even that it's uninteresting, it's just told in a really uninteresting way and is filmed like it's, like All the President's Men or something. It's just not the way to tell those stories. I think we can all agree that George Lucas is probably not the best director. He's an incredible storyteller. But he didn't direct, Empire Strikes Back, right? He knows how to build a universe and, create the booklet, tell us what we have to do, and then we will tell it in a better way. So I think when he is able to throw his hands up a little bit, and back up, I think that is where the magic, is allowed to happen and sort of give it to people who might know how to tell it in a more loving or interesting way. But I wish I could say I like the prequels more. But growing up, those were all the toys that we had, because those were the ones that were coming out and everything. And, I still have my box of all my Star Wars toys and, my little Anakin dolls and everything. But yeah, what about you? Do you appreciate the prequels?
I never really had a major problem with it. I didn't get to see. So I was in that weird thing where I grew up during the original trilogy, but my family wasn't into movies and we didn't get to go to movies. And so while I was super obsessed with Star Wars, because that's what everybody in my neighborhood was obsessed with, I didn't get to see any of the original trilogy films in theaters. I didn't see them until they came out on VHS or they would show up on TV and those types of things. And so my first film going experience with Star Wars was, being 24 years old and going to see The Phantom Menace. And that was just super cool, right? For me. And I get that, that there were things that were clunky about the storylines, as well as the scripts and the dialogue and all of those things, but they were fun. I remember, about Attack of the Clones being in a packed theater at a midnight showing when that first premiered, and when Yoda and Count Dooku are battling on Geonosis and Yoda's flipping all over. I mean, the place is going nuts in that theater. And because you're there with a bunch of midnight crazies. And so, that kind of thing was how I got to re-engage with Star Wars with it. So I have a sincere appreciation for the prequels, because I didn't ever think we'd ever get Star Wars again.
That's pretty cool.
I was growing up.
Yeah. We have a line in the show where they say the prequels are like pizza. Bad pizza is still pizza.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny because we have a line that we say on this show all the time about Star Wars, that all Star Wars is good Star Wars, just some of it's better than others. And so it's the same type of thing.
Exactly.
Funny. When was the musical written? What year?
So we wrote it. It opened early 2019 on May the 4th, actually. So we ran a year before COVID shut it down. This is our first time really picking it up again in New York. Thankfully. And what's so interesting was 2019 was sort of a momentous year for Star Wars stuff coming out. So we had to continuously rewrite it throughout the year. We rewrote for when Mandalorian came out. We rewrote for when Rise of Skywalker came out, obviously. That's sort of the fun of this show, is that it is constantly changing and constantly being updated. And, it has since been rewritten since it closed. And, we always say we really shot ourselves in the foot with recording the cast album when we did, because the Leia song is only about the first two prequel movies. So now it's like, well, damn it, we have this version where we talk about all three prequel movies, but maybe we'll do a bonus track one day for a reissue, for the vinyl release.
There we go.
Exactly. But that is sort of the fun of the show, right? Is that like you can come see the show that has been running for a year, but like they're still updating it, right? And it still feels fresh and new. There is reason to continually come back. We have people who have seen the show 5-6 times, like there are truly like super fans. And what's great about the show too is that you honestly do not have to know Star Wars to love it. One of those people who has since become a friend, who has seen it 5 or 6 times, they have never seen a Star Wars movie, but they just love this show, and they love this. It's about, quite frankly, you could swap out every single reference and make it about Harry Potter. You could make it about anything. What it is about fans coming together and talking about something that they love. And, people like to see that. People like to see, especially now, people like to see things bring joy to people.
That's awesome. So, what's the hero's journey of this musical? Like, you mentioned that you were brought in by the producers to write it. Sort of, how did this all come about, and what's the process been like? You mentioned you guys were on for a year, and then COVID hit, which obviously changed everything for everybody, but especially everybody on Broadway. And now it's back again for a period of time. Kind of walk us through the story of this musical. Yeah. So the story of this musical is about Scott and Taylor, a Millennial Falcon and Gen X-winger, as I mentioned before, who decide to put on a Star Wars tribute musical to try to get into Comic-Con. And they hire a female actress to come in to play Leia and whatnot. And it turns out that this actress, Emily, who is played by an actress named Emily, is actually there to sabotage the show and stage an artful protest against Star Wars and, show the world how misogynistic and problematic Star Wars is, right? So when her protest doesn't quite go as well as she wants it to, they come up with a deal that she has to stay if they can convince her that Star Wars is actually great. And thus that gives us a reason to talk about for 90 minutes why Star Wars is great and why actually Star Wars is pretty progressive. And, while it may not be perfect, it's come a long way, baby. And it is going to continue to become, better and better. So the hero's journey is quite honestly just about 3 people coming to love Star Wars more, and one character specifically coming to love Star Wars and really understand it and see its sort of societal value. That's awesome. So, how has this? You mentioned, you guys did a showing in Nebraska with a 3,000 seat auditorium, which had to have been just absolutely electric.
It was wild. Yeah.
What's the reception been? Not just on off Broadway, but nationwide and that type of thing. And have there been any other showings like what you experienced in Nebraska and that type of thing?
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed. I don't know what I can say, but hopefully there will be a national tour within the next year or so. Yeah. No, I mean the showing has been really great. Commercial off Broadway is such a weird beast, and it truly does not exist in the same way that it did 30 years ago. So to have this show that can sort of healthily survive, for a year off Broadway, right? And then come back and hopefully do just as well the second time around, has really been a blessing. And, I every now and then, I will go to the theater and I will go stand in the back of the house and just, see how the audiences are. And, very rarely has there ever been an audience that just hated it with walkouts galore, No, there's never. Well, there was one walkout actually, but, I think she might have thought it was Dear Evan Hansen or something. But yeah, people, again, like, you don't have to love Star Wars to love the show is what's so special about it, I think, is that, like, if you love musicals or if you have something in your life that you just love and every factoid about, I love Star Wars, but I also am a huge musical theater nerd. Mm-hmm. And there are so many musical theater references in this show. Right. Like, it truly is everything that you would want when you put Star Wars and, off-Broadway musical together. Right. So again, it's just sort of this, like, campy, ridiculous, like, stupid. It's stupid. Like, we like warn people before they come, like, this show is dumb, but, like, once you, like, accept that, like, you will just have the best time, So yeah, and I'm just thrilled that, we have this album out and that, it is able to reach fans, far and wide, and that, you in Alabama, right, are able to, listen to this album for this small off-Broadway show, and have it make an impact on you, and that this Hamilton number is something that you can, listen to with your son and connect with, So yeah, and again, the fans have been great. We have one incredible super fan of the show who is making me a lightsaber earring for our reopening night, which I can't wait to wear. But yeah, it's awesome. We have a really cool community of folks rallying around the show. It really means a lot.
Well, you've obviously passed the test as being a super Star Wars fan, because not only do you know a lot about Star Wars and you wrote this musical, but you're a big fan of The Last Jedi. So whenever I have someone on the show that is clearly for real a Star Wars fan, not just somebody that says that they're a Star Wars fan, I like to close with this question. For you, how does Star Wars inspire hope?
Oh, shucks. I think Star Wars there's this model of musical theater right now that we talk a lot about. It's the build a better world model, right? Where, like, if we come together and we, fight for change, we can actively inspire a better world. And I think Star Wars follows that same exact model, right? It is about a young group of, ragtag outsiders who come together, see how the world can be changed, and maybe there's some hesitance at the beginning, right? Maybe there's resistance in this sort of Aristotelian, hero's journey style with Luke. But, like, it is about young people coming together and fighting for a better world, fighting for a better galaxy, and like we say in the show, being the change that you wish to see in the galaxy, right? And I think that is not just what draws me to Star Wars, but draws everybody to Star Wars, right? This idea that, like, the world sucks, like, planets are being blown up around us, but, like, if we, like, see how we can make the world a better place, and not walk blindly into making that change, but actively, like, going through and coming together with like-minded people and having that plan, having the blueprint of the Death Star, like, then, a better world is out there. So yeah.
I love Billy's answer to how Star Wars inspires hope. We're living in a world that seems like it's horrible and only getting worse. So many people are giving up on doing anything but making sure that they're taken care of. It's not unlike the Star Wars galaxy under the rule of the Empire in the First Order. It seems hopeless at times. But I'm also reminded of that moment at the Battle of Exegol when Poe is convinced that the resistance has failed until he hears the voice of an old rebel general telling him that there are more on the side of good than evil. We need to see the possibilities of what can happen when we come together to embrace hope. And that's a great reminder from Billy. If you are anywhere near New York City from December 17th through January 2nd, make sure you go and see a musical about Star Wars at the American Theater of Actors. You can check out all the information about the show and get your tickets at amusicalaboutstarwars.com. And thank you so much for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. If you enjoyed this interview, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on your app so you get every episode the moment it drops. Our next episode releases on Tuesday, and we're going to try to figure out where things go after that big reveal from the 4th episode of Hawkeye. And then we'll go ahead and give some of our biggest predictions sure to go wrong for Spider-Man No Way Home. And then I'll educate BB Nate and Samuel LaHutt on a Legends character that has been reintroduced into Star Wars canon and why it's such a big deal. Make sure you follow the Tatooine Sons on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Share this episode with somebody else so that you can help others find the show and help the show grow. And that's going to do it for this Friday episode. There's only one thing left to say.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.